They claim that our eyes will just be either slightly different from what they are, or we talk, we see things are not normal.
Welcome to Strange Familiars. Allison, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well.
Glad to hear it. Well, on tonight's show, I'm going to be continuing my conversation with Brother Richard after he did the commentary with me on last week's episode about Randy and the Pale Crawler. We talked a bit more, including about this Vatican document, The Norms for Proceeding in the Discernment of Alleged Supernatural Phenomena. I had a bunch of people comment on that, the fact that we hadn't covered it yet. That happened back in like mid-May, I think, that came out. And a bunch of people were like, hey, you should be covering this more than any other podcast. And a lot of people thought it was going to be the Vatican talking about UFOs and aliens and stuff. It's really much more of a document to do with supernatural phenomena that one might encounter within the realms of the church, for instance, like Marian apparitions and things like that. But it's still really interesting to me, and we have covered Marian apparitions on the show. We did a 2-part episode on Fatima with Brother Richard a while back. So I think it's pretty interesting. Brother Richard also just got back from a conference on exorcism.
Can I just talk about how I think, like, the idea of a monk conference, how does that differ from, like, a...
I don't think it was just monks. I think it was priests and anybody who was a potential exorcist.
So what do they do in their downtime? Like...
I imagine there's cake.
You think there's cake?
There's cake, I'm imagining. Maybe pie. It was in Italy, so there's probably good food.
You know, the older I get, I feel like a gluttonous pasta dinner versus like drinking or something seems like much more interesting to me.
Yeah, I didn't ask him what he did on his downtime. See, this is why you should be there when I have Brother Richard on, because you can ask these kind of questions, which would be interesting.
See, I find that whole, like, he probably lives a much more normal life than we think, and we've given it this, like every human has certain things that they have to do in a day, regardless of whether their life revolves around, like, you know, people who have like jobs or vocations with some gravitas, you know, like people in the medical field or government. You still have to have like a bad day where you just want to come home and watch TV, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Like, what do they have?
Like, what do you do when you have a bad day as a monk?
Pray?
Oh, I guess that's the...
Yeah, I don't know if they have like a TV room in the friary. I imagine they might, right? Like, you know, like for recreation time. I don't know. These are all questions that you could ask Brother Richard. You'll have to jump on the next time he comes on the show.
And do they have DVDs? Is it like
you can ask him.
Old episodes of The Flying Nun?
Yeah, I have no clue.
Rosemary's Baby for a scary night?
These are all questions to ask Brother Richard. In the second part of the show, I'll be talking with Gabrielle and Jody about what they said on Facebook was a goat man sighting. And I understand why they said that, because it was like kind of using shorthand, the closest thing maybe that it might have been. But when they describe it, it's a little bit different. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to my conversation with Brother Richard, in which I did not ask him what he does in his downtime, either in Ireland or when he was in Italy for this conference.
And what do you pack in your luggage as a monk? That's the other thing, too. Is it all just robes?
Yeah, dress robes and casual robes.
You're like, oh, what if we go out to dinner? I'm going to want something nicer.
All right. Well, you mentioned you got back recently from, was it a conference of exorcists?
Yes, I did. Yeah. So there is an International Society of Catholic Exorcists, believe it or not, which was founded by the very famous Father Gabriel Amorth, who was chief exorcist of Rome for many years before passing to the Lord quite recently. He and others were worried sort of in the late 1980s or so, early 1990s, by two things. Number one, a rising increased need for good exorcists who had been trained well, and also a kind of a falling in the older methods of training exorcists, which would have been pretty much an apprenticeship model. You know, a bishop would always have had a designated priest within the diocese who was the designated exorcist. Usually he would have a younger assistant who was kind of learning from him, and so it went, on and on. But what had happened was that really there had been a kind of a break in lineages in many places. And so in order to make sure to repair that, to make sure that people were acting well and properly and observing, all of the advances as well in things like medical science, for example, or psychology, the association was founded, and Father Gabriel was elected as its head. It was given approval by the church, and it was asked to not only train exorcists but also to research all of these areas, and to put together a document on guidelines for deliverance, liberation, and exorcism, which are various categories of these things, and also how one would assess the need for these things as well. The difficulty was that in some situations you had people who were using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut kind of thing, knowing what to use and when to use and how to use it, and particularly to recognize that this is, not something esoteric, not something frightening. It is simply part of the commission the church received from Christ, and it's also part of the mission of mercy of the church, to reach out to those who are in need in these ways. So I had been involved, as I say, on the periphery. I want to be really clear, I am not an exorcist. An exorcist as an office is something that can only be named by, within the Catholic tradition, I should say, is something that could only be named by a bishop who commissions a priest. So the way it's looked at is the priest, by virtue of his ordination to the priesthood, has the ability to exorcise, but he may not have the permission to exercise that particular ability unless the bishop commissions him to do so. So in an emergency case, any priest can exorcise. But normally what would happen is somebody would come to me, for example, they would say, we have problems, we have difficulties, we have issues. We would go out and deal with those if they're at the lower levels of things. But if we suspected that somebody actually needed full exorcism, then that is passed over to the diocesan exorcist, who has a commission of a medical doctor, a psychologist, and a psychiatrist, and at least one of those must be non-Catholic. And they would review the person and their case to make sure that it's not a medical manifestation or a psychological manifestation or psychiatric or, something like that. And it's only when all of those things have been exhausted completely that the person would be brought forward for full exorcism. So just to give you an example in terms of the numbers, the average, if you want to give an average percentage, if you have 100 cases brought forward to you of people who the suspicion is they perhaps may need exorcism, of that group, only one or two of that group would actually definitively need full exorcism. And the one thing that discounts people coming forward for it is that if people are actually turning up saying, I think I need to be exorcised, you can almost immediately disqualify them, because if they were possessed, they would not be allowed by the possessing spirit to come forward for exorcism. So usually in the cases where it's actually needs to happen, it would be family or partner or people who are close to them that would be so upset by the manifestations they're seeing that they would ask for this to happen for them. Yeah, so every summer there is a summer school that takes place in Rome. When I was there were 190 participants from all over the world. And we had lectures on the history of the rite, the methodologies to be employed, how to assess people who were coming forward, the place of the medical doctor, psychiatrist, and psychologist. We had very interesting lectures on addiction, and particularly how it's very important not to mistake manifestations that happen through addiction, either through alcohol or various forms of drug, as being demonic manifestations when they're not. They're just the various forms of psychosis or hallucination or whatever that can happen through the application of these particular substances. In fact, the recommendation in the guidelines is that if somebody appears who thinks that they need this kind of assistance, but who is also manifesting an addiction, no spiritual assistance is given in the shape of exorcism. No spiritual assistance is given until the person has managed to come through a rehab course to make sure that there is nothing in the system and nothing that could could cause these kind of manifestations. So it was very practical. It was surprisingly joyous and good humored all the way through. People might think that it would be a very kind of serious place, but the great gift in the midst of it all was the constant refrain from those who were actually full-time exorcists themselves, that this was, the work of the Lord, that it's certainly not about, frightening people or trying to cause dependencies or anything like that. It's about liberation. It's about the freedom of the gospel, the good news. It has always been, it was part of the mission of Christ, as we read in the Gospels, and it's been part of the mission of the church to this day. So from that point of view, it was interesting and an intense week. And I mean, the preternatural stuff was dealt with as well. We had a number of sessions on the kind of manifestations that can take place when it is definitively possession. And yeah, there were some interesting things to be dealt with there in terms of things like manifestations that take place while and when somebody is possessed, including, quite interesting, from a strange familiar's point of view, manifestation of unusual animals.
Ah.
Yeah, so we had cases described where while the exorcism was going on, giant cats appeared, large indeterminate canid kind of animals turning up and appearing. Nobody mentioned apish or Bigfoot-ish creatures, but in the lecture, but it came up in the conversation afterwards. So yeah, so all of these things are, as I've said often, the same channels and the same shapes seem to be used by different things at different times. And I had some very interesting conversations on the periphery with a number of American exorcists who are working in, I never know how to say this properly, so forgive me, Appalachia.
It changes.
I never know how to say it properly, but they're working in that area. And what was interesting was they were dealing with what seemed to be Celtic fae elements or elementals or spirits, whatever way you want to put it, who had traveled with various Celtic lineages from Ireland and Scotland over. That was really interesting. We had some interesting conversations there, as you can imagine. So yeah, it was a very kind of professional conference. It ran for a week. They were long days. Italians like long working days, so we would start at 7:30 in the morning and finish at about 7:30 in the evening. But it was well worth doing. And I suppose maybe for people who kind of have a very medieval understanding of how all of this works, to have people who are producing peer-reviewed studies, who were actively working with scientists, with anthropologists, with psychologists, etc., who were monitoring the work that they were doing and writing various theses on them and things like that. It was theology as a science rather than as a kind of a mystic art from the Dark Ages.
So Christians, and particularly Catholics, as a form of, I suppose, the shorthand, like to say Jesus was the first exorcist. But did the pre-Christians, did the Jewish tradition have a way to deal with like?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah. And we see it even in the Gospels. Sure, at one point when Jesus is asked, the suspicion is that, or at least the kind of the authorities who are trying to malign Jesus at that stage are saying, well, he's only able to do this because he's in league with the demons. And the response that Jesus gives, of course, is that if the kingdom of Satan is divided against itself, then it's going to fall anyway. But he asks the questions, if this is the case, then who do your experts, in what authority do your experts exorcise demons? How do you answer that if that's the case, if the demons are exorcising demons? So yeah, it was a practice all the way back in the Jewish tradition. And I mean, really, look, it's a practice that's present in all traditions all the way back. The understanding that a human being can become a locus or place of struggle, a place of possession, has been present. There have been, the traditions where willing spirit possession is allowed or is part of it. The kind of going back to whether it's the oracles of Delphi or the oracular spirits of Tibet or those kind of things. Within the Judeo-Christian tradition, such willing or opening up was never seen as being something good. It was seen as being something quite dangerous. But if possession took place in any particular way, then there were remedies through the application of scripture, praying, fasting, invoking the name of the various names of God, etc. And these were all methods that worked within the Judaic tradition up until the advent of Christ. And I suppose, obviously, as a Christian myself, speaking from within the tradition for a moment, the way we would understand it is that, as you see in the scriptures, one of the things that the Jewish authorities keep coming up against is that Jesus speaks with authority. So their exorcists, etc., just as I would as an exorcist now, I don't exorcise in my own name. I wouldn't give orders to spirits in my own name. I would be doing it through the intercession of the church and in the name of Christ. Whereas what we see in the way Jesus exorcises, which is what makes it completely new, is that he simply orders and they obey. There is no question of calling on another power or another authority. He is the authority in that sense, and they must obey immediately. And so that's the differentiating principle within this, that you don't have someone who is invoking the divine in order to do something. You have the divine acting, at least within the belief of the Christian tradition.
So the other thing we have to approach here is, and I've been called out several times by people in comments, like, I can't believe you aren't doing a show on this. The Vatican recently came out with new guidelines.
Yes, it did indeed. Yeah.
In the approach to, I think it's mainly in the approach to Marian apparitions, but is there a broader sense there too that they're addressing?
It's with regard to the title of the document that was produced is Norms for Proceeding in the Discernment of Alleged Supernatural Phenomena. So it engages with all of them, but it was particularly to give guidance with regard to Marian apparitions. It was presaged, I think, online by a lot of people with the headlines were out that were crazy, like, Pope about to give press conference on aliens, was one of the ones that I saw. And in fact, even in the discussion after the document was promulgated, was made public, some of the reporters continued to ask questions about UFOs and aliens, much to the amusement, actually, of the people from the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith who were there to announce this document. And they saw it as having nothing to do with the alien question or UFO question or anything else. As they said themselves, if such things exist, then the church would wait for science to say what they thought they were before the church would make any kind of decision on it. But what essentially happened was, and I suppose, again, for listeners to understand, so the church isn't like a big corporate organization where the Pope is the big boss at the top and knows everything that is going on and is in control of everything. A lot of the departments would have various levels of autonomy, and one of the most important of those departments is what we call the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. So this is the group that are charged with maintaining theological orthodoxy. This is the job that they have from sort of commissioned by the Pope. Now, obviously, they act under the authority of the Pope, but you need to understand that it's a lower level. So when you see the words Vatican says, that doesn't automatically always mean that it's the Pope who's saying it, or that the Church is claiming infallibility, for example, for it. This would be seen as what we call part of the ordinary teaching, the authority of the Church exercised for the benefit of its own people, to sort of give clarity.
As I understand it, not even everything the Pope says is necessarily to be considered infallible. There are statements.
Absolutely not. There's a very, very limited set of circumstances. So the Pope is only considered to be infallible when the following conditions take place. Number one, he is speaking on a matter of faith or morals. So he can't be infallible talking about history or science or anything like that. It has to be on the matter of faith or morals. Even when he is speaking about faith or morals, he is not necessarily infallible. He is only infallible when he says, "This is now an infallible statement, and I speak in the name of Peter from his throne and under the authority of the keys given." So those kind of statements happen extremely rarely. I mean, you're talking maybe once or twice a century, So we do not believe as Catholics that the Pope is infallible. If the Pope gets up in the morning and says, tomorrow is Friday, but actually I believe it's Tuesday, that's not infallibility, and nobody is expected to follow that. This is a very, very ancient authority which was granted, we believe, by Christ to St. Peter and through Peter to his successors to ensure the authenticity of the Church's teaching in moments of crises particularly. So this press conference, which, whenever the Church talks about supernatural things, it tends to immediately draw huge levels of attention from the media, and very often the media don't understand the technical language that the Church is using when it's talking about this. So this document was issued because they are slowly reviewing norms across the whole area of kind of theological investigation and work. And it just happened that this is the document that's being issued to deal with supernatural phenomena, and it replaces an earlier document which was issued in 1978. So every so often, like every organization, the church will look at how it does things and will review things and say, look, here's maybe a better way or a renewed way of doing it. So this document is to look at, and I'm quoting now, phenomena such as alleged apparitions, visions, interior or exterior locutions, writings or messages or phenomena related to religious images, and psychophysical phenomena. These will also include reported Eucharistic miracles as well. So that's the document itself, setting out what it's about to speak about. And as you can imagine, it has nothing to say about aliens within that particular paragraph. Though if you want to broaden your spectrum to non-human intelligence, then we would include things like the angelic and diabolical world within that. And you could say that the document maybe has elements with regard to that within it. The other thing that they really wanted to do was to make this as transparent as possible. The earlier document had been issued privately to bishops to assist them in their discernment, because discernment of these matters falls to the local church primarily, and it's only when the local church has made its decision on it that that decision would then be sort of sent up the chain for either approval or disapproval from Rome. And the previous document was a guidance document only for bishops, so they decided to make this document completely public so that everyone and anyone would know exactly what the church teaches with regard to this. So the big news is they give 6 categories by which all of these phenomena may be judged, and some of these are old and some of these are new. So I can go through those if you like.
Please.
if you want to. So the categories going from the most approved to the least approved. And this is one of the things to understand, is one of the things that this document did was it said that actually what's important in the consideration of these phenomena is not the phenomena itself, but the spiritual fruit it produces. So the clear discernment as to whether this is something good and of God comes not from the manifestation itself, but from the effects the manifestation has on the life of the faithful or the life of the world.
I see this as a very, very positive thing. As someone who's interested in Marian apparitions that haven't been, quote unquote, approved by the church, this gives, in my view, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it gives lay people a lot more freedom to sort of look at things on their own and say, well, yeah, good things are coming from this.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so this goes right the way back to scripture, right the way back to the teaching of Jesus himself when he said, by their fruits you shall know them, So we look at the fruits and we see, is this actually lifting people up? Is it connecting them to the divine? Is it unifying them with the church and with the legitimate authority within the church? Or is it something that's producing division, anger, hatred, or abuse of any kind? So the first and most important one is the level of what they call nihil obstat, which is Latin for nothing obstructs. And this is used for any phenomena that are connected with, quoting now, many signs of the action of the Holy Spirit being present. So in other words, good fruit. And where so far, and this is one of the interesting things, they use time language a lot within this, so far no aspects that are particularly critical or risky to the life of the faithful have been detected. So one of the problems that have really a more recent issue is what we call ongoing revelation. So you have a place like, for example, Medjugorje, where the apparitions are reportedly going on a daily basis for well over 30, 40 years now at this stage. Mm-hmm. And so normally it would have been the practice of the church to wait until something had finished completely before judging it, because you could make a false judgment. A direction could happen afterwards, sort of belied the judgment that you made. And so now what they're saying is, okay, look, there are some things that are ongoing. They don't look like they're going to finish anytime soon. So if we are going to give a positive approval, what we're saying to the faithful is, look, there's nothing within this so far that would say to you, that would make us say to you, avoid this or be careful of it. But we reserve judgment. We reserve the ability to kind of go back afterwards and say, actually, everything was fine until 2005. And that's when the guy who said he was receiving the visions suddenly began to say something crazy, or suddenly began to, take your money or whatever, those kind of things. So we come back to that. The second level is the category of preoculus habetur, which says, let it be held before the eyes. That's what this title translates as. And this is used for phenomena that are still showing important positive signs, but also shows some aspects of confusion or potential risks. And so consequently, the church says observing what's going on here, doctrinal clarification might be necessary. So this would be very much the possibility of, say, for example, if you have a visionary or someone who's manifesting signs or whatever, but there could be the mistake made, for example, with regard to the kind of co-creation of simple level of imaginal visioning, that the person is unaware that their own psyche is involved with regard to this manifestation as well. And so they're making very dogmatic statements, that are supposed to apply to everywhere and to all people. And they're not aware of the fact that their own particular psyche, their own particular culture even, is mixed in with this in ways that could be negative. So what the church is saying here is we can honor good fruit coming from something, but at times there might be the need to give teaching to clarify what is real or what is not with regard to the vision or the manifestation. The third level is curator, which means something to be attended to. And this is used for phenomena that have various or significant critical elements, but have nevertheless spread widely and are now connected with verifiable spiritual fruits. So let's break that down. What they're saying is a manifestation of some description has happened. In some ways, this looks like it could be maybe just human reason, human weakness, or it could be even diabolical. But out of it, good spiritual fruit has happened around the world. And so we keep a very close watch on this. We can honor the good spiritual fruit, but we might have to come back and say, maybe the thing itself was false. In these cases, the bishop is told not to encourage the phenomena and to seek out alternative expressions of devotion and possibly try and reorient the spiritual and pastoral aspects of this. So, for example, a vision takes place, and as part of the vision, there's supposed to be a procession or an apparition chapel set up or something like that. What the bishop can do in that instance is say, look, we can't give credence to what is happening here because maybe the content of the message or whatever is aberrant in some way. But we can say, Marian devotion in this place is very important, and we will set up a chapel and we can have, processions and devotions, etc. So what they would say is that they can create legitimate, good devotion, even where the thing itself might be clearly coming from some kind of false experience, and sort of taking the devotion of the faithful and saying to them, look, we can show you good ways to manifest this rather than being part of a negative or false experience.
Yeah, this is all very, very positive stuff. From someone who's interested in this side of things, I read all of this as just being incredibly encouraging and incredibly positive.
Oh, it is. And it's also very strong on the idea of the maturity of the faithful. Mm-hmm. To actually, recognize that once the tools are given to be able to evaluate spiritual fruit, and this, in terms of it coming down the line like this is very, very strongly influenced by Jesuit spirituality, which is around the cultivation of what was known as the discernment of spirits, of being able to know whether an impulse or an event or an intuition comes from God and should be followed, or comes from either the ego or the negative part of creation and should be ignored. And so really you can see the spirituality of Pope Francis, who himself is a Jesuit, being displayed, but through the teaching of the dicastery in this way. Fourth category, just to keep going, is submandato, which means under a mandate. And this is used for phenomena that are rich in positive elements, but they have discovered they are being misused in some way, such as by a person, a family, or a group. So this is where you might have a visionary, for example, who has had a genuine vision or a genuine miracle takes place, but now other people get involved and they start charging money or they start trying to create a cult around the thing, or there might be abuse of the visionary or manipulation of the person going on. And this has happened in history. One of the ways in which you can look back and see that this has happened is, for example, with regard to the vision of La Salette, which is one of the confirmed authentic Marian apparitions. But there was some really kind of dodgy stuff that happened later in the lives of the visionaries where they were exploited by people. And so this basically charges the bishop as having the important duty of protecting the good fruit and protecting the authenticity and the integrity of the manifestation. Number 5 then is prohibitor et obstruter, which means prohibited and obstructed, which is going to be fairly clear. And this is used for phenomena that have some positive elements but have very serious critical issues and risks. And in this instance, if the bishop sees this, he is to declare publicly that adherence to this particular phenomena is not allowed by those who want to be in faithful communion with the church. So this is where you would have a manifestation that is either clearly teaching something that is not that is inimical to the Catholic or Christian message, or where manifestations around it are immoral or are possibly even diabolical or abusive. If any of these things are discerned, then the bishop must declare publicly that any Catholic who wishes to remain in communion with the church may not give adherence or follow this particular teaching. But you'll notice that even that says that this phenomena can have positive spiritual fruit. And this is the understanding that where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more, going back to the scriptural understanding that even where the brokenness of human ego or even diabolical phenomena appears, God's grace comes to heal that, to renew that, and to invite people through that into a deeper relationship with God. Number 6, the last one, you'll be glad to hear, for all of those people out there who are now bored silly. This is Declaratio de non supernaturalitate, which is the declaration of non-supernaturality. This is used for phenomena that the bishop and his commission of inquiry have now found to be not supernatural, based on, and this must be based on, facts and evidence that are concrete, recorded, and proven. This would be things like a visionary admitting that they had lied, witnesses detecting fraud of some description, mythomania, which is an excessive tendency for lying or exaggeration present within the people that are there. If this is discovered, then the bishop naturally has the duty to declare publicly to the people of God, the church, that nothing supernatural has been found within this, and without necessarily impugning the reputation or getting involved in legality, to be very clear that the visionary or the person with, who's supposedly manifesting these supernatural phenomena is not to be followed, is effectively a false teacher. What we notice in the midst of all of that, those 6 categories, though, which is really interesting, is that one of the things that isn't there is a firm declaration that something is absolutely supernatural and fully approved. And not even the nihil obstat implies that. The nihil obstat simply says, look, we don't see any obstacle at the moment to being aware of this. And the reason for that is because within this document, the ability to declare something 100% fully supernatural and part of the life of the church in that way is now reserved only to the Pope. So the Pope himself is the only one who can declare, say, an apparition, for example, as approved. Now, that in fact has been the working case wherever these things have happened. Bishops can give something like local approval, but that would always be with the understanding that papal approval hasn't taken place yet. And the bishop is still, sort of using his authority to say, for the moment I can give approval, but in the end it will be in the hands of the Pope. All that this document does is to make that official. And so the reason for the new norms, Cardinal Fernandez, who published them, said, there had been a tendency in the past to conclude, to want to conclude very deliberately that phenomena are either 100% supernatural or 100% not supernatural. And so what he says is that if phenomena were to be declared to be supernatural, this immediately made the faithful think that in some way they had to give the assent of belief and faith to these manifestations or apparitions. So again, Cardinal Fernandez and the Pope are going back to what is the clear catechetical teaching of the Church and has been from the beginning, which is no Catholic no Christian, no human being needs to give any assent or belief to any supernatural manifestation or apparition or whatever, or to any of the teachings that come out of them or from them. Even those that have been approved, the only thing that we are bound to believe if we want to be part of this particular faith tradition are the creedal truths of the faith, all of which are the basic kind of dogmas, the catechism of the church kind of thing. Anything else beyond that, any private revelation, as it would be called, is supernumerary to that and should only be seen as something that complements or deepens and produces greater spiritual fruit. It is not meant to replace primary teaching. So that's the document. As you say, it's a very, very positive document. It's charged in a positive way. It's been really interesting to see the media commentary on it, because some of them obviously just kind of read the Cliff Notes version and went, oh, the church is saying it can't decide whether something is supernatural or not anymore. That's absolutely not what it's saying. What it's saying is that there are various categories, and indeed that sometimes these categories will even overlap, and sometimes in the midst of the same historical manifestation, there might be periods of time where one category applies and periods of time later where another category applies. But it really stresses the pastoral nature of the bishop's office in terms of minding any of the faithful who are going through these experiences to make sure that they are not either misled or abused or hurt by others or exploited by others. And for anybody who's read the history of some of these manifestations in the past will know that there are always people, in the background who sort of sniff blood in the water when these things happen, the kind of sharks, and move in and can often confuse and muddy the waters terribly, or try and manipulate the visionaries or the people who are receiving these revelations. And so what the church is doing here is saying, look, in the end, the only judgment we can possibly make about any of these things is to look at their spiritual fruit. Have they actually assisted people to become holier, more compassionate, more gospel living, more in tune with the church and the sacramental life of the church? And if they're not doing that, then something has gone wrong somewhere.
People have heard me talk about, in a very passing way, Garbandol, my interest in these apparitions. Sure. And I promise to listeners at some point I'm going to do a deep dive on that.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I will get into all the aspects of it, but it's not been approved, and I believe probably the main reason is predictions were made, and the church simply can't approve something unless the predictions come true,
No. So, and again, if the predictions are made and they're not particular, they're not connected to particular dates, rather they're connected to, I think that with Garabandal, as far as I remember, they were supposed to take place before the death of the visionaries.
Yes.
So, they're getting up there in age at this point. Yeah, what the church will say, as it says about Medjugorje, as it says about any of these places where there are predictions of things that are to happen in the future, is that, well, obviously we can't say yay or nay until we discover whether or not these things happen.
Yeah.
So there'll be a standing back and a kind of an encouragement in terms of, if this helps private devotion and helps to increase faith, that's fine. But there wouldn't necessarily be kind of a public approbation or even necessarily a public encouragement towards pilgrimage to these places or things like that. Anybody undertaking them would be undertaking that in a private capacity rather than a sort of a public statement of this is an official pilgrimage of a particular diocese or something like that.
As I read these new rules, I can look at Garbandal though and say, like, well, look, if the reports are to be believed, conversions have happened, great healings have happened, wonderful things. I credit my interest in Garbandal for kind of bringing me back to the church.
Sure.
Sure. I can look at that and say, well, the fruits of goodness are there.
Absolutely. And I think one of the great things about that and about the current document is that it recognizes that even where there might be some level of dubiousness about either the manifestation itself or parts of the manifestation. I think that's something we need to be really, really aware of. I mean, we spoke about it in the Fatima episodes that we did, to recognize that apparitions can take place and that are absolutely genuine and fully, what they are supposed to be, but they do manifest through the psychology of the visionary. And so they are a kind of a mediating influence. And so that doesn't mean that the thing isn't genuine, but it does mean that the vision can only use what's in the mind of the visionary. And I think once we bear that in mind, then we begin to be very clear that, you can get to the heart of the message very quickly. And the heart of the message in all of these genuine ones, wherever they have been prayer, repentance, returning to God, making the divine central in our lives, and being compassionate and kind to one another. And they tend to be the core messages wherever and whenever these things have taken place.
Yes. Again, I just saw this new document as completely, freeing is an odd word, but it did, sort of set me at ease. It's like, okay, I'm okay looking at this stuff, until I'm told, maybe like, hey, something comes up and there's something's discovered. It's like, hey, maybe
Sure.
be worried about this aspect of it. But as far as the sort of main things and the things that we know about it, again, other than those predictions, which the church is never going to approve it until they're proven
Sure.
one way or another.
No, can't do it.
Yeah.
The other element around it, I suppose, to be very clear, is sometimes people think that the church is sort of sitting there, waiting for these things to happen so as to use them as kind of like proof texts for the supernatural life of the church. And actually, it's the complete opposite. The church starts in all of these manifestations with the sort of the understanding is that nothing supernatural has happened here, and we have to investigate it to prove to our satisfaction that something may have happened here. And so the commission of inquiry that a bishop is expected to put together on this would include, not just theologians and, people who deal with spirituality, but the commission actually must have on it, experts in the sciences, in psychology, in the medical end of things. And it must include people who are non-believers, who are actively out there to disprove. And it's only if it makes it kind of past that assessment that then the bishop would begin to consider whether or not something supernatural has actually happened here. So sometimes I think it can be portrayed as, a very credulous body of believers who are just looking to grab anything that they can use as a proof text. But in actual fact, it's the opposite. And the church goes out of its way. And similarly, going back to the exorcism ministry and deliverance ministry, if we're called into a house, we are fairly exhaustive in terms of trying to make sure that, we go there with the understanding that it's probably not that, and trying to discover what it is before we would actually turn around and say, unless there's really extraordinary manifestations immediately, and that we're dealing with something kind of supernatural here. So it's kind of the opposite way around. And, the church tries to make sure that if there's a commission of inquiry being sent out or investigators are being sent out, there's no Mulder, they're all Scullys going out there to try and make sure that there's no deception going on or no, and that doesn't mean deliberate deception, but, people can have problems and mental difficulties that manifest in various forms of religious mania. So what the document is doing is saying, we take into account that all of this is possible, and we give 6 different categories to view it through. But the main thing that everybody should look to is the fruit of what's happening. And if there is good fruit happening, we will always honor the good fruit. It says, that part of being an adult Catholic is to recognize that the supernatural is part of our life and our world, and to have the tools necessary to be able to discern through that journey.
Brother Richard, thank you once again for coming on Strange Familiars. I always love it when you're here. You are a wonderful resource for our show. Thank you.
You're most welcome, and it's always a joy and a privilege to be there and to be part of it. So thank you, and blessings to all those who listen.
I mentioned last week, Allison, that we are thinking about raising the entry-level rate for patrons from $4 to $5 a month.
For new patrons, not for people who have already signed up.
Exactly. We're still kicking around this idea. It's probably going to happen. Like I said, the cost of everything's going up. We just need to raise the prices. But for now, it's still $4 a month. If you get in at that level, and frankly, we're going to rearrange all the tiers. All the pricing is going to change. But at the lowest tier is $4 a month now. If you get in at that level, as long as Patreon lets us keep this policy, you'll be grandfathered in. So up to now, they've let us grandfather in. Like we started at $3 a month at the lowest tier, then we raised it to $4. We have plenty of people who are still at that $3 a month tier. Now it's not available to the public anymore, but they still get that content. So as long as you stay subscribed, you will get that price. So if you want to get in now at $4 a month, now's the time. I'm not sure when we're raising the rates. Really, it's a matter of when I have time to work on the Patreon site. Might be soon, but now's the time to get in. Get in at $4 a month. As long as Patreon lets us keep the tiers that way and lets us keep it that way, you'll be grandfathered in, and it'll stay $4 a month for you even when we raise the rate. Patreon is where you can support us if you like what we do and you want to help us make the show and get extra content. It's patreon.com/strangefamiliars. All of our patrons get commercial-free versions of the weekly shows as well as extra episodes every month. We do at least one exclusive episode for our patrons every month. Again, it's patreon.com/strangefamiliars. There's also an option on Apple Podcasts called Patron of the Strange, and our supporters there get the commercial-free weekly shows as well as the extra episodes monthly. And I want to thank all of our patrons, no matter where they're supporting us. Thank you so much. You are the reason why this show happens. Next up, I'm going to be talking to Gabrielle and Jody about this creature sighting, probably not a goat man, that they saw. I'd like to welcome Gabrielle and Jody to Strange Familiars. How are y'all doing tonight?
Great.
Good. How are you?
How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to get this story. I only know that it's Goatman and that it's in Pennsylvania. Beyond that, I don't know anything about it, and I'm happy for that. I'd like to be kind of surprised by this, but I'm excited to hear the story. So, as much as you're comfortable, tell us when and where this happened, and if you want to be general, we talked a little bit before we started, I understand that. You can be pretty general with the location, but give us an idea, of about when and where this happened.
So, it was April 20th of this year. We had gone out, so a little backstory.
Sure.
When we travel, we'll travel together and we'll look to do things that are like paranormal in nature, whether it's an investigation or just a location that we're visiting. And we were kind of like, well, I'm getting overpaying for these things. Let's just start a group and go out and, do these things together. Mm-hmm. And this was kind of our first investigation as a group. And it was pretty local, like near home, right, in Lackawanna County, like Clark Summit area.
So it was...
We're from like the Scranton area,
okay.
Northeast PA.
Okay, so this was you two plus other people?
One other person.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and my daughter and her boyfriend were there, but they had just left within minutes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we had been there maybe about 2.5 to 3 hours we had been there. It was a really weird night. We had kind of gone to like check out the location and see what we would expect at night.
We went prior, like probably about a week before, was it?
Yeah, about a week.
Just to get kind of like a feel for like the land, because there's been like a lot of flooding and there's a stream nearby, and like the road changes, like things get washed out, like little bridges and stuff like that get washed out.
Sure. Once again, I know it's sort of a private area and you don't want to give the specific location, but is this generally a park or is this some place that people go generally?
It's pretty big for like recreational, like fishing. Mm-hmm. It's like very heavily posted. Like there's properties along the stream. They definitely do not want people on it.
Gotcha. Understood. Yep.
But if you're like during the day, if you go during the day and you're fishing, no one's really going to bother you unless you're messing with their stuff.
Okay. So this is an area along a creek, in other words.
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Gotcha.
So we had that night. It was a pretty full moon. The full moon was actually the next night. So there was a lot of like moonlight. We didn't really need flashlights for the whole night.
Yeah, we had like pretty good night vision, I guess, right?
Yeah, it was pretty
reflecting
bright.
Pretty well.
So we had the whole night we had like weird feelings. We felt like something was watching us. You could hear things kind of in the trees. We were seeing like lights. You were seeing lights mostly.
Me, little Lorenzo, and Skylar too.
Yeah.
They were seeing them.
So describe these lights.
So I've been fishing up there since I was a kid, and like I always got creeped out when the sun started going down up there, because it's a really dark road. There's like pines and it's like pretty heavy forest, and like since I was a kid, like I would always catch like glimpses of like almost like flashes out of the corner of your eye, and they're usually like like green or blue or red or whatever. And you could never quite catch them like staring like directly towards them, you know what I mean? Like they're just...
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
When we were up there, I never really, like, to me, like when I was like growing up, it was just normal to me, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, sure, there's streets nearby, but like you're in between kind of like a gully almost. You have like a high bank on one side, then it goes down into the stream, and then there's a high bank on the other side of the stream. So I was kind of like in a little valley, sort of. It's weird because you're thinking the whole time, oh, it's it's a car light or something like that. But
yeah, because you're really not very far from the road.
When it's in the middle of the forest, like in between that valley right there, like where the stream is, like it's not coming from.
Right. Yeah. There's not a car driving up the middle of the creek.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So, like I was like, oh, you guys see that? And like Lorenzo was like, yeah, I keep seeing like something out of the corner of my eye, and he's like, oh, they're green or blue or aqua, and talking to Skylar about it too. Now Skylar's my stepdaughter's boyfriend.
Okay.
And they came up to investigate with us, and he's like, I keep seeing like shadows. Like I keep thinking there's like people like walking up and down the stream. It's just creepy up there at night. Like it's a different place during the day. I mean, it's creepy enough during the day, but there's like old ruins and like like pump stations and graffiti and all that, and a few urban legends. So you kind of have like that in the back of your mind.
Right. Sure.
So we had just about wrapped it up. My daughter and her boyfriend decided to leave, so we had followed them out, and we were all standing. Well, the three of us had been standing by the cars, and we were just talking, about things that we had planned in the future and just different things in general. And to the right of us was like a little carve out for cars to park. And to the left of us was like wooded area. As you went a little farther down, there was some embankment, and you could hear like a raccoon almost in the woods, like just chattering and like moving leaves. So I was like, what was that? And then Jody said, it's just a raccoon. So I was like, okay. It gets a little farther down the road, and I thought I had seen a deer jump over the embankment into the road. So I jumped back thinking it was coming at us. And they were like, what was that? And I was like, I swear a deer jumped the embankment. There was nothing there.
I didn't even see it.
No one else saw it.
No one else saw it. Like, we call bull on it, you know what I mean?
So then a couple feet down, there was like a gate that cars cannot drive on the road. You can only walk it. So on the left-hand side of the gate, it was like a black shadow, and it was like a hunched over person standing up, shape of a black shadow of a person.
It's bulky though, right? Like,
and then it crossed the road, and on the right side, it was almost like a bear. You could hear it in the woods.
On the left side, it looked like an upright thing, and then as it crossed, did it sort of transform in a bear? Or
it was like a bear.
Okay.
It was weird. So then it had come from raccoon, deer, person, bear.
Interesting.
So then it's in the woods, and I said, we should probably get out of here before whatever that is that just went into the woods comes out here near us. And as I got the words out of my mouth, something came charging at us and grunting at us from the woods and scared us. We left. We immediately left. They had shined their lights on it, and as soon as they hit the lights, like hit it with the lights, it was gone. And again, like the moon was really bright, so you didn't need a flashlight. You could see it, and it was like it had mass. It was black.
Black, real dark.
It was like 7 feet tall, probably.
Yeah.
And it didn't really have like horns. It had antlers.
Antlers, wow.
And it was like bipedal, like it was on 2 legs.
Wow.
And it it grunted and then like bluff charged us. And then as soon as they hit it with the lights, it was gone.
Like it dissipated or ran off?
No, it just wasn't there. Like it didn't make sense because this is like a big animal that had like mass, and like you could almost feel like
you couldn't see through it.
When it grunted, you heard like you could feel it through your body. We were probably
maybe 50 feet.
Maybe 50 feet, yeah. And when it came at us, it was like I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a nostril kind of grunt, right? Like,
yeah.
Like I don't know if you could hear that.
Yeah, like an animal blowing or something like.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, like a quick grunt, snort, sort of thing.
Huh.
As soon as we shine the lights on it, it was gone.
Wow.
Gone.
Completely gone. So it's coming at us, and it's got nowhere to go because it's on the road. Coming at us from the side of the road and like running at us. And then we turn all our lights on, it's gone. And like we didn't even think, we all got in our cars and left.
Sure, yeah. So it definitely looked like an upright something. Yeah. And
yeah, I mean that's what Gab says. I mean, I think I interpret it a little different, but I think that's I'm used to seeing deer around here. I mean, it wasn't like any deer I've ever seen. It was just especially with the moonlight on it like that, like. And deer, they have like that tannish reddish color. Like it doesn't make sense for it to be black under a full moon. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Like deep black.
Yeah. And you could hear it kind of stomping your way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you could feel it.
Wow. Yeah, bluff charges are. I mean, it seems like Bigfoot's known for doing, but I think other things do it too in the paranormal, and I think it's the best name for it because they never seem to arrive. We've had it happen a couple times to us out in the woods, and it sounds like bulldozers coming through the woods, and then it never comes out. It never arrives. So the fact that you actually saw it approaching, and as soon as you hit it with the light, it just wasn't there. It kind of makes. I mean, it doesn't make sense. It's bizarre, but I mean, it sort of seems to jive with the other stuff in the paranormal. I will say that. Wow. Then you saw sort of antlers on the top of its head. Like, were they big?
Yeah, there was definitely antlers. Definitely antlers. She was saying horns, I know, but like it was definitely antlers.
Yeah. It had like a full like rack
of horns. Basket, yeah.
And this was, what month again did you say it was?
It was April 20th.
April, so yeah, I mean most buck would have not grown in their antlers again yet, right?
Right.
At this point, yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. Very interesting. Well, did you go back the next day to look for tracks or anything like that?
I want to go back.
I don't want to go back.
Ah, gotcha.
I definitely want to go back. I mean, I'm never, I fish up there, so I'm definitely going back at some point. So.
Well, you're a couple hours north of me, but if you're willing to have me, I'll go out with you.
Yeah,
awesome.
That'll be awesome.
All right, I'll head that way. We'll make some plans to do that.
I'd like to go back. Just, I mean, if something there like showed itself to us, the chances of it doing it again are probably high. So, I mean, it's worth a try again.
It's interesting, like, so some of the places we talk about, the one we call Gazoo's Woods, the one we call Site 7, especially those, I've never been to the place you're talking about, but they're similar in as much as there are houses around. These aren't like complete in the middle of nowhere wilderness places,
Yeah.
They're woods and it's not, like a complete city kind of thing. But there are, scattered houses here and there. And these are some of the most active places we go to. And I find it very, very interesting. And I used to think like, maybe, that's kind of weird. But I talk to a lot of other people that do this. And it seems like a lot of people have places like that. It's odd. It doesn't make sense, I guess, if you think of these things as, needing wilderness or whatever. But, chalk one up for the weird side of things, I suppose.
So we have some theories. When I was in college, I was part of a paranormal group. And this was one of the locations that we investigated. We would call it Urban Legends Night.
Okay.
So we would choose 2 or 3 locations locally. We'd go out in a couple groups, we'd investigate. If anybody thought they had an active place, we'd go back to that place for a second investigation that night after midnight. And this was one of the locations, and it has a reputation of, different things. There's allegations people were murdered there. There's an urban legend about a bride and a groom that had been killed on the road. A lot of different things have been said, and I feel like that then attracts people to go and try to find that. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like have people looking for it, infuse the area with that energy so that things are just kind of there and happening when you arrive.
Absolutely. I truly believe this happens. I look for these kind of places to go for that reason, not because I expect there to be anything as regards to these urban legends, but because of that. Because it draws people there and they bring the energy there, and somehow, I don't know how it works, but somehow these places seem to get infused with this energy, or things are attracted to it. I'm not exactly sure, but yeah, absolutely, those are the kind of places I look for to visit for sure.
Yeah, because we had searched before we went. I was like, well, I want to see if anything really did happen there. And you can't really find anything, but there is one little interesting article. I'll have to send it to you.
That's
about
recent,
like the urban legends. Yeah, I think it was from like 2020, 2022, something like that.
Mm-hmm. If we can just for a moment, because I'm so fascinated by these lights, they pop up all around this stuff. If we can just revisit them for a second. First of all, when you say you were like catching them in the corner of your eye, that's how we first see them, especially at Site 7, peripheral. You pick them up in your peripheral vision, and then you can focus in on them. So that checks a box for me. Would you say they were like orbs, and could you guess a size on them, or were they just lights, or how would you describe them?
To me, it doesn't look like someone shining a light through the forest. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to explain it. It's like a flash of light, like a circular flash of light.
Would you say they're sort of self-illuminating? In other words, they don't really light up too much around it?
Oh, yeah. It's very confined to like a pinpoint.
Yeah.
Small area, yeah. Absolutely.
Some of the ones I see almost have the quality of like man-made lights. It's crazy to say, but they almost look
that's what's confusing me, because they look like man-made lights, but they're not. They're definitely not.
Yeah, they look like LEDs or something out there, and you're like, what the heck?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. Yep. Yeah, I mean, again, checks a box. Don't know what they are, but they seem to pop up around this stuff. Very, very interesting. Gabrielle, Jody, thank you so much for sharing your story. Since you're going to be out there looking for stuff, if you run into anything else, please share it on Strange Familiars.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely.
Thanks for doing the show, Tim. It's a great show. We really enjoy it.
Oh, thanks so much. Saturday. In Columbia, Pennsylvania.
No.
This Saturday in Columbia, Pennsylvania, June 15th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., you can find us at the Macabre Market. That's in Mount Bethel Cemetery, 700 Locust Street, Columbia, Pennsylvania. It is free, so come on out. There will be macabre vendors, including us.
I believe there will be hearses as well.
A hearse show. And on the flyer here it says you could hunt for all sorts of curiosities and oddities. But mainly you're going to be wanting to hunt for Strange Familiars t-shirts. And I'll bring some prints of my artwork, my books. I will sign them right there for you. Allison has various oddities she's bringing, including some skulls, including some big skulls. What else you bringing, Yeah, have you decided yet?
My charming personality. So you don't want to miss that.
And Allison's charming personality. People have asked about parking. I believe there's going to be on-street parking, but there's a car show, I think. Is there a car show besides the Hearst show? Is the Hearst show the car show?
Yeah, I think there's a car show beyond, but like the town has a ton of on-street parking.
Yeah, come to Columbia, you'll find parking.
Yeah, it's not one of those places where you're driving around 15 times and trying to find a parking.
It's not a huge town.
Yeah, it's little. Like anywhere you park is walkable.
So once again, that's at 700 Locust Street in Columbia, Pennsylvania. This Saturday, June 15th, 10 to 2, the Macabre Market. Come on out, meet us, share some stories with us, pick up some Strange Familiars swag. That might have been the first time I've ever used that word. Did I use it correctly?
Yeah, just delete that.
Strange Familiars t-shirts and stuff, prints, and maybe we'll bring some mugs. I don't know. We'll bring a bunch of Strange Familiar stuff.
And then you can wander down Locust Street, and there is a ton more stuff to do. That's where I have my other booth at State Theater Vintage.
That's right.
You can go to Brian Keene has a store in the corner that's a bookstore with sci-fi stuff. And
books and comics.
Books and comics
Vortex.
and sci-fi books and stuff like that. Horror books. And then you can walk further down the street, and there's like 4 or 5 different vintage clothing shops.
Plenty of places to get good food.
Yeah, Obscure Relics is down the street. And plenty of other antique stores. There's a lot to do if you want to just spend the day. But the key is that it's only 10 to 2, which is kind of ideal because that's all anybody ever shows up to events anyway. Everybody's done by 2 o'clock, and nobody really wants to show up at 6 in the morning to prepare. So this is perfect. Let's just get it all done in the amount of time that it really happens.
I like when things go a little longer, but maybe I'm just thinking about Albatwitch Day when it necessarily goes a little longer. In order to handle all the crowds, honestly.
In the fall, though, and this is going to be in the summer when it's warm.
Yeah. So hope to see everybody. I hope everybody listening comes out on Saturday.
Do you now?
It'll be quite a crowd.
Cemetery's going to have trenches in it.
Curiosity this week. You've brought more drug propaganda, Allison.
I did not. It's darker and worse than that. It's Alice in Wonderland.
Go ask Alice. I hear she's pressed against the wall so she can see the door.
See, I already had a joke planned based on that.
Based on what? The Sisters of Mercy song?
Yeah.
Really?
When you were going to say, how much do you want for this? I said, I was going to say, don't give it away.
Don't give it away. Oh, all right. Well, the 5 people listening that got that are overjoyed. That we made 2 Sisters of Mercy references in one Alice in Wonderland book thing. So this will be our Curiosity of the Week.
This is a version I hadn't seen. I think it's from the 40s.
Yeah, you kind of collect different versions of Alice, don't you?
I do.
Yeah, this is from 1947, Maxton Publishers.
It's got an interesting white rabbit. Like I just like the way that Alice kind of changes with every generation, and we kind of see her anew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the artwork inside is more interesting than the cover would lead you on to believe. Kind of watercolor pieces.
I don't know that I've ever seen this version of Alice before. There's a Cheshire Cat. There's a Queen of Hearts.
Hookah-smoking caterpillars. Mm-hmm. One pill makes you smaller.
Yep.
On tiptoe, she peeped over the edge, and instantly her eyes met the big blue eyes of a big blue caterpillar sitting on top. Its arms were folded, and it was smoking a kind of pipe called a hookah. It took not the slightest notice of her or anything else. We'll leave it at that. So this will be our Curiosity of the Week. Maxton Books for Little People. Seems kind of like a predecessor of the little golden books, were they called?
Yeah, I actually got a little golden book of Alice the same day. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, maybe what I should do is put them both up there and you can have your pick. Let's do that.
Is that what we're going to do?
Yeah, I'll put the little golden book up too.
Okay, you're going to have to find that.
Oh, no, I know where it is. I just got it. It's at the top of the pile.
Okay. All right, so we will put 2 children's book versions of Alice in Wonderland up. You can choose either one. These will be the Curiosities of the Week. I'll put a picture of one or both of those in the show notes. If you click on that, it'll take you to Etsy, where you can purchase these and other Curiosities of the Week, those that are still left. They do sell. The old ones do sell occasionally. Like the Viking just sold. It hadn't sold for a while. That sold. Great way to help us out. Check out the other stuff in our Etsy shop. Strange Familiars t-shirts, stickers, patches, mugs. My books are there. If you get them from us on Etsy, they come signed. You don't even have to ask. I'll sign them before they get put in the mail. Allison has ephemera up there, various old pictures and different things like that. In the Flower Pass section, I am right now sold out of rosaries, but I will be making some. I'll make them with the antique crucifixes from France, which are really cool from the 1800s. I'll make some with those, and I'll try to put a variety up there besides those. But in the Flower Pass section, there are Flower Pass t-shirts. There is the zine of Catholic Ephemera, Petals and Thorns. There's 2 issues of that now. There is a record, I believe, by the Forest Beggars, a 10-inch record. We only made a few of those. So you can pick that up there as well. It's a lathe-cut 10-inch record. And a lot more. Go ahead and check out our Etsy shop. Like I said, if you purchase from us on Etsy, it helps us with the show. Our shop name is Lost Grave, but if you type in Strange Familiars, you should see our stuff come up. Just a reminder, Allison has an antique stand at State Theater Vintage in Columbia, Pennsylvania, and we have one together with Chad in Hanover, Pennsylvania at Black Rose Antiques. Anything else we want to mention, Allison?
I think that's it.
All right. Hope to see everybody at the Macabre Market on Saturday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., Locust Street, Columbia, Pennsylvania. We'll be back soon with more Strange Familiars. Strange Familiars is a production of Dark Holler Arts. Intro and background music is by Stone Breath. If you want to hear more or purchase music, you can go to stonebreath.bandcamp.com. We're on Instagram at Strange Familiars, one word, no underscore. Please give us a like and a follow. Make me feel like an influencer. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/Strange Familiars. The Strange Familiars Gathering Group is there. And you can find us 24/7 at strangefamiliars.com.